United States President Donald Trump has for the first time called Russia an aggressor in the war against Ukraine, which demonstrates a change in his position towards Moscow. That's according to the publication Politico. And Donald Trump himself later added that he believed he would be able to end Russia's war against Ukraine very quickly. But this task turned out to be too much for him, so he admits failure. But paradoxically, according to the logic of the American president, it's not aggressive Russia that's to blame for this, but Europe, which supposedly sets impossible conditions and refuses to put pressure on Moscow. And Kyiv is also to blame, according to Trump's logic, because it simply doesn't want to hand over its territories to the Russian dictator. In fact, over the past 2 days, Trump has publicly admitted his inability to end the war that he promised to stop in 24 hours. In addition, Trump said that it's still necessary to figure out who is to blame for starting this war, Ukraine or Russia, and that Putin and Zelensky won't meet because they hate each other. Trump had already announced their meeting back in August. Let's break down Trump's main controversial statements from the past few days and try to determine the real position of the American president today regarding Russia's war against Ukraine. My name is Alexei Pecci, and before we start this episode, I want to remind you that on this YouTube channel, several news and analytical segments about events around the world are released every day. So you stay updated on all the news. That's why I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel and ask you to like this video. United States President Donald Trump has, for the first time, labeled Russia an aggressor in the war against Ukraine, indicating a shift in his stance toward Moscow. That's what Politico believes. And next I'll quote Trump. This week, 8,000 soldiers from both countries died, a little more from Russia. But as the aggressor, you lose more. Although earlier, Trump refused to condemn the Kremlin and denied United Nations resolutions and the G7 statement, which have long called Russia the aggressor. In April, Trump also blamed Ukraine, stating that, quote, it had no right to start a war against a significantly more powerful opponent. What's wrong with his logic when he says that Ukraine had no right to start a war? So does that mean when you're attacked? And according to Trump's logic, Ukraine shouldn't have done anything. However, as Politico writes, Trump's position has changed. During the summer, the United States administration began putting more pressure on Putin, trying to push for direct peace talks between him and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And again, a quote from Trump. I stopped 7 wars and thought that this one, the war between Russia and Ukraine, would be easy for me, but it turned out to be difficult. Both Zelensky and Putin hate each other, and despite the tougher rhetoric, the Russian dictator is not entering into negotiations, and the United States is facing calls to impose tougher sanctions against Russia. Trump promised to tighten restrictions, but only after Europe stops buying Russian oil and is the first to strengthen its own sanctions. Again, another quote. European countries are my friends, but they are still buying oil from Russia. The sanctions they are imposing are not tough enough. Let me remind you, Hungary and Slovakia remain the largest buyers of Russian energy in the European Union and oppose the European Commission's plans to gradually phase it out. United States Secretary of Energy Chris Wright said the United States aims to remove all Russian gas from Europe to limit Moscow's ability to fund the war. Nevertheless, Trump himself admitted his failure today. He made a statement regarding the upcoming meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, noting that for it to take place, he would have to intervene. Trump, in particular, stated that ending the war in Ukraine turned out to be more difficult than he expected due to what he called the incomprehensible hatred between Putin and Zelensky. Quote, I want to stop this, and I stopped 7 wars. I thought that Russia's war against Ukraine would be easy for me, but it turned out to be a failure. The hatred between Zelensky and Putin is incomprehensible. There will be negotiations, whatever you call them, a summit or just a meeting, it doesn't matter, but I'll probably have to intervene. They hate each other so much that they can hardly talk. They just aren't able to talk to each other. But it's funny that Trump didn't answer the question about the possible timing of such a meeting, but still loudly declared again that it would happen, quote, relatively soon. It's telling that even Trump's advisors and his fellow party members in Congress are all shouting in unison that it's time to strangle this dictator Putin. Russia is actually not winning on the battlefield, said United States Presidential Special Representative Kit Kellogg at a conference in Kyiv, noting that this question was asked. And here is a quote from Kellogg. Is Russia winning? That's a great question because President Trump asked me the same thing in the Oval Office about 6 weeks ago. The same question, and I answered firmly, Mr. President, don't just listen to me. Your chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, is waiting outside. He's standing by the car. Invite him in, ask him about this. He's your top military advisor. And then it went on. Kellogg noted that both he and Kane, in the end, told Trump the same thing. There's no talk of a Russian victory. Another quote. Dan Kane said the same thing. The Russians are winning? No, they're not winning. And Putin can say he's winning as much as he wants. In reality, Russia is losing this war. If Putin were winning, he would be in Kiev, west of the Dnipro, in Odessa, and would have changed the government. Russia is actually losing this war. At the same time, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, stated that the time to impose sanctions against Russia has long since come. But the United States Congress will not impose them without the consent of President Donald Trump. Let me also give you a lengthy quote from Mike Johnson. I truly believe that desperate times call for desperate measures, and I think that appropriate sanctions against Russia are long overdue. I mean, there is a strong desire in Congress to do this. If you translate it literally, there's a big appetite to do this. That's why we are ready to work with the White House and our colleagues in the Senate and the House of Representatives to make this happen. And I personally am eager to do this, but Congress can't do it on its own. The President will have to sign everything we do and approve it as law. This has to be a partnership, but we answer to our Commander-in-Chief. I mean, the President is a strong and courageous leader on the world stage. He has helped achieve peace around the world and in other conflicts like no one before him could. That's why we believe he can use that same strength and approach to finally put an end to this war in Ukraine. Well, for now, all we have are a lot of very loud, very outspoken statements from Donald Trump, which often contradict each other. So I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.